The Pacific War was a theater of just unimaginable extremes, wasn't it? A place where American industrial muscle and Japanese defensive desperation just collided head-on. By early 1945, the brutality, the technology, both had reached a terrifying peak. We're diving into the sources you sent us today, focusing on an infamous battle for Iwo Jima.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission in this deep dive is really to pull out two core stories that define that battle. The sheer engineering marvel of the Japanese subterranean fortress, and, on the other side, the terrifyingly efficient counterweapon the Americans developed specifically to beat it, the flamethrower tank.
Exactly. And, to really get that conflict, you have to grasp the strategic stakes first. Iwo Jima itself, physically, it's tiny, just a small, barren speck of volcanic rock. 8 square miles, that's it, black sand, ridges. But where it sat, roughly 750 miles south of Tokyo, that made it absolutely critical, a vital stepping stone for the final push.
Right.
American planners knew it would tough, sure, but their initial estimates, based on, the sheer weight of their firepower, they thought maybe a week, tops. A week? That optimism, well, it proved deadly pretty fast.
It really did.
And that was the strategic picture, but you mentioned the tactical context had shifted entirely by 45. Japan couldn't really compete materially anymore, could they?
No, not at all. That's precisely it. They pivoted, moved away from conventional island defense to a strategy focused purely on delay and attrition. Brutal attrition. General Tadamichi Kurobayashi, the commander on Iwo Jima, he realized that any forces out in the open, on the beaches, they'd just be annihilated. Naval guns, airstrikes, gone in hours.
So the goal changed.
It became pragmatic, grim even. Make every single island invasion so unbelievably costly, so bloody that the Americans might just flinch, might be deterred from invading the home islands themselves.
And Iwo Jima was perfectly placed for that kind of strategy. Its airfields were key.
Absolutely key. If Japan held them, they could keep intercepting the big B-29 raids coming up from the Marianas. But if the U.S. took it,
then it becomes this vital emergency landing strip for crippled bombers heading back,
right?
Saving potentially thousands of lives, right?
Exactly. Saved thousands of airmen. And it also became a launch pad for fighter escorts. P-51s could then go all the way to Tokyo and back with the bombers. So yeah, the island's strategic value, immense for both sides.
So Kurobayashi's answer wasn't just digging a few holes. You called it an underground city.
That's really what it was. He believed the only way to neutralize that overwhelming American firepower was to put his entire defense vertically. Get it underneath the bombardment.
And the scale described in the sources is just staggering. More than 11 miles of interconnected tunnels carved directly into volcanic rock.
11 miles confirmed, and they likely planned more. These tunnels, they weren't shallow trenches, they went deep, sometimes 7 stories down. And they linked everything. Thousands of caves, command posts, ammo dumps, hospitals, firing positions. His garrison, about 21,000 soldiers, could basically move across the entire island underground, unseen.
Appearing only when they needed to fire.
Precisely. They'd surface, engage, and then just vanish again. That's what created this sense of a phantom enemy the Marines faced. You clear a bunker, move on, and suddenly you're taking fire from it again.
And the surface defenses weren't separate. They were woven into this maze. Nearly 1,500 bunkers, pillboxes.
Some reinforced with 4 feet of concrete, steel bars, and every single firing port, every embrasure was sited to create these deadly interlocking fields of fire, covering the beaches, the slopes. Nowhere was safe.
How did they sustain that? Keep fighting down there.
Clever engineering. Disguised ventilation shafts, essential for breathing that sulfurous air, thick steel doors to seal off sections if they were breached, and enough supplies, food, water, ammo, calculated to last at least 2 months.
2 months underground.
This was resistance designed to simply outlast the invasion force. And what's really telling about Kuribayashi's mindset, his shift away from doctrine, he explicitly forbade the traditional suicidal banzai charges.
He wanted kills, not just death.
Exactly. Efficient resistance, he told his men. Kill 10 Americans before you die. Make it count. Maximize the cost to the enemy.
Okay, so this new strategy, this focus on attrition, it all hinges on the fortress holding up. But the Americans threw everything at it beforehand, right? 72 straight days of naval bombardment, airstrike.
Nonstop, hundreds of thousands of shells, tons and tons of explosives dumped on just 8 square miles of rock.
So why didn't that work? Why did that massive firepower fail so badly?
Because, essentially, brute force hit a wall, a very deep, very hard wall of volcanic rock. The naval shells, even the bombs, they just couldn't penetrate deep enough to reliably take out those core positions.
Right.
The war had reached a point where geology, rock, and steel could actually neutralize conventional artillery. If you can't physically reach the enemy, you can't defeat them. Simple as that.
Right. So that failure basically created a massive engineering challenge for the U.S. Their biggest strength, overwhelming firepower, wasn't enough. They had to innovate. They'd used portable flamethrowers before, haven't they, in other island battles?
They had, yes, for clearing caves, bunkers. But those were, well, pretty crude tools, really. Effective, but only at very close range, maybe 30, 40 feet, and they were incredibly heavy. The operator was completely exposed carrying this bulky tank on his back. Casualties among flamethrower teams were appallingly high. It just wasn't sustainable, especially not on this scale.
So the weapon needed an upgrade. It needed protection, range.
Precisely. It needed to be mechanized, protected, given the ability to stand off.
And this is where it gets really interesting, the pivot point in the engineering response. The Americans took the workhorse, the Sherman tank, and turned it into something else.
A terrifyingly effective something else. They ripped out the standard 75-millimeter cannon.
Replaced it with a nozzle.
Essentially, yes, a nozzle connected to huge pressurized tanks inside the armored hull, filled not with shells, but with fuel. Thickened fuel. This thing didn't fire explosives. It projected a stream of bringing gasoline mixed with napalm over 150 yards.
150 yards, that's a football field and a half.
Easily. And crucially, the crew was inside the tank's armor. Protected, they could sit back relatively safe and just hose down enemy positions.
But it wasn't just about the distance, was it? You said thickened fuel, napalm. What made that the specific counter to Kuribayashi's underground fortress? What was the genius, if you can call it that, of the chemical?
That's the key. The napalm was sticky. It wasn't just a flash of fire, it clung. It coated the interior walls of bunkers, the observation slits, the ventilation shafts, and even more critically, when that much napalm burns in a confined space, it just sucks the oxygen out instantly.
So Kuribayashi engineered vents for his men to breathe.
And the flamethrower tanks turned those vents into delivery systems for fire and suffocation. They could push that burning, oxygen-devouring jelly deep down into those 7-story tunnels, regardless of how thick the concrete was.
So it's dual purpose then. Physical destruction, yeah, incinerating everything, but also this profound psychological terror.
Oh, absolutely.
You're fighting an enemy who decided to just vanish beneath the earth, to become untouchable. And you create this thing that can reach down there and burn them out or suffocate them.
That's it, exactly. The sources are clear. Few weapons inspired such primal fear. For those Japanese soldiers sealed inside, knowing that an armored beast outside could, at any second, bathe their tiny concrete world in inescapable fire. It must have been utterly demoralizing. It was a direct counter to the whole strategy of delay. It forced an immediate horrific choice. Burn alive, suffocate, or run out into the open.
Where the Marines were waiting.
The
invasion kicks off February 19th, 1945. The Marines hit the beaches, that black volcanic ash. It just swallowed men, machines.
Like quicksand. Treacherous stuff. And initially, it was weirdly quiet, eerily silent.
Kuribayashi's plan.
Letting them land. Letting them mass on the beaches, thinking maybe it wouldn't be so bad, get comfortable. Then, with chilling coordination, the hidden guns opened up. From everywhere. Positions nobody could see, raking the beaches, the approaches, impossible to locate, impossible to hit with return fire effectively. The Marines were just pinned down, taking horrific casualties from an unseen enemy.
Until the next day, February 20th. That's when these strange new tanks rolled out. Smoking, making that sound.
Yeah, not the familiar boom of a cannon, more like a low, sinister hiss. That's how veterans described it.
A hiss. Then the flame.
Then this huge torrent of burning liquid arsing across the black sand, maybe 150 yards, splashing against pillbox walls, pouring into firing slits, finding those ventilation shafts. Inside, apocalypse. The thickened fuel sticks to everything, turning these tiny, cramped concrete boxes into furnaces, stealing every bit of breathable air.
The accounts you mentioned, the human cost, the intimate horror of using this weapon, that's what seems to define the unique brutality of Iwo Jima.
They are absolutely harrowing. You read one Marine private's account.
Yeah.
He just describes watching a flame tank engulf a pillbox, completely swallow it in fire. And he remembers seeing Japanese soldiers stumble out, literally on fire, before collapsing. He said the sound, their screams, haunted him for the rest of his life, decades later.
And the view from inside those tunnels.
Equally brutal, just unimaginable. A Japanese survivor wrote years later about the constant torment, breathing that damp, sulfurous air anyway. And then the heat building, The awful, choking smell of burning fuel filling the tunnels. Even deep down, once the flames found a way in through the vents, there was no escape from the heat, the fumes, the terror.
It makes the engineering specs, the miles of tunnels, the concrete thickness. It almost feels abstract next to that human reality.
It does. It was just a unique kind of hell engineered by both sides.
And this grotesque contest, this duel between fire and stone, it went on for 36 agonizing days.
36 days. And the Japanese defenders, they didn't just collapse under the flame attacks. They adapted. They used the tunnels. They shifted positions. They'd vanish from one spot after taking incredible punishment, only to emerge somewhere else, sometimes behind the American lines. Marines found themselves fighting for the same piece of ground against the same enemy unit multiple times in a single day.
The defense was just layered so deep.
Yeah.
You mentioned Hill 382.
Yeah, the notorious strong point, nicknamed the meat grinder. It had underground chambers big enough to hold an entire battalion. Despite days of relentless bombardment, direct hits, constant flame tank assaults, the defenders just kept fighting, shifting positions inside the hill. It held out for days until finally, basically, they ran out of ammunition and water. Not because the structure failed, but because the men inside were spent.
So 36 days, 36 days of that on this tiny speck of rock. The cost was just staggering. What did it all mean in the end?
For the war. The numbers are just horrifying to contemplate. Almost 7,000 Americans killed, over 19,000 wounded, for the capture of 8 square miles. On the Japanese side, out of maybe 21,000 defenders, only a few hundred were taken prisoner at the end. The vast majority were killed, many sealed inside the tunnels they'd built. The fortress literally became their tomb.
But the U.S. did take the island. The airfields became operational. You said they saved thousands of airmen.
They did. The operational impact was real. B-29s used it constantly for emergency landings. The fighter escorts based there made a huge difference. So militarily, it was a victory. But it came with this grim warning, as the sources put it.
A warning about the cost of future operations.
Exactly. Immediate and profound. If this tiny island, defended by men dug in so deep that conventional bombs and shells couldn't dislodge them, if that cost nearly 26,000 American casualties, what would an invasion of the main Japanese home islands look like? Large islands, millions of defenders, potentially the entire civilian population mobilized. The math was terrifying. The sheer bloody cost of Iwo Jima weighed incredibly heavily on American military and political leaders. It directly fueled that awful debate. Is a land invasion actually feasible or survivable, or are alternative means needed to force surrender?
Alternative means including, implicitly, the atomic bomb.
That was certainly part of the terrible calculus Iwo Jima forced upon them.
So when you boil it down, the battle for Iwo Jima was this contest between two extremes of human ingenuity, wasn't it? The ultimate defense, the fortress, made almost impregnable by burrowing into the earth.
And the ultimate defense designed to defeat it. The unstoppable machine, the flamethrower tank, using chemistry and terror to root out an enemy who had tried to vanish.
The ultimate lesson, perhaps, revealed on those black sands is that victory doesn't just come from invention alone, does it? Whether it's digging tunnels or building tanks.
No, it seems it comes from sheer endurance. Endurance in the face of absolutely unimaginable destruction on both sides.
That's certainly something for you to mull over. The interception of technology, strategy, and the sheer human will to resist or destroy, even when buried 7 stories deep.